Monday, March 16th, the S&P closed up 1%. Today's show, I just want to do two things. Just quickly check in with oil in the Middle East and then do a deep dive into Nvidia. So as far as oil is concerned, we know what's going on in the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz, but I want to look at Saudi Arabia for a moment. They've got a pipeline, technically two, that run east to west, and they've got a port on the Red Sea at Yanbu. It's called the King Fahad Port, and it's significant. It's the largest oil port on the Red Sea. It has 34 berths for ships, and it can accommodate the largest of the super tankers in the world. And so normally they export about a billion barrels per day, a million barrels per day through this port, but they've 5x that now. They're doing a little over 5 million barrels per day. And so it's significant what they've increased to. And just an interesting note, this is also was the home of Lawrence of Arabia, if you ever saw that movie or read that book. But the one thing that I do want to point out is that even the Red Sea is absolutely has a risk to it because the Houthi rebels have not intervened in the U.S.-Iran war yet, but they are there in the Red Sea and have absolutely been a risk to traffic, maritime traffic, in the last several years. So we haven't heard from them yet. But those 5 million barrels that the Saudis are exporting through the Red Sea at this point make up for a majority, but not all, of what they export normally through the Persian Gulf. Normally, they do 6 to 7 million barrels per day over there. They're compensating for 5 in the Red Sea. So there's an offset there. And just to compare, overall, the worldwide exports out of the Persian Gulf are about 20 million barrels per day. So definitely not a huge dent in the overall supply, but it is notable. So I just want to call that out. And then let's jump into Nvidia because, as many of you know, I used to be a network engineer. And so I love geeking out on technology once in a while. And Nvidia this week, today and tomorrow, they have their GTC Conference, General Technology Conference, and a couple of significant announcements. They're shifting from really being a chip maker to a full AI systems provider. And as we've talked about over the last year, the price of memory, of CPU memory, has skyrocketed, and that really has become a bottleneck for a lot of the build out of the AI systems. And so with that cost and supply issue, Nvidia, of course, is now, they announced today that they are manufacturing their own CPU called the Vera CPU. And it's designed specifically for very long single thread inputs. So when you and I type in these long paragraphs sometimes of questions into our chatbot, it's designed to handle those specifically. And then also NVIDIA announced that they have a new language processing unit, LPU, which is the Grok 3 LPU. And that is going to take the thinking time for artificial intelligence to basically zero. So the combination of those two, this specialized chip for very long involved questions, and then when you put that question in and it does the thinking on it and you see it spinning and all that, that is basically going to disappear with this new Grok 3 LPU. It's going to take that to faster than you and I can even read. So those are a couple of key announcements. And, you know, the Blackwell chip from last year and then this new Rubin chip, just comparing the two. The Rubin chip has about 5 times the throughput, and it does it at 10 times lower cost. So 5 times more throughput, 10 times lower cost. And, you know, just to review when we talk about tokens, a token literally You know, we used to be bits and bytes, and now we're tokens. A token represents about 3/4 of a word. And so the cost per token, you know, everything that goes into that, that's the spending for the CapEx, the capital expenditure on it, you know, the hardware and all of that, the cost of the energy, the idle time that the chip just sits there, that costs time too. Think about like a taxi when it could be, you know, picking up rides. And then also the human cost of the engineers to, you know, maintain the data centers, all of that. All of those costs go into figuring out the cost per token. So uh, a few other things are the NVIDIA CUDA software platform. It's a platform, it's a programming model for computer programmers, and they use it. So they're really adopting that software and that programming platform for writing, and it really has a sticky base of programmers there. NVIDIA has also the NVLink, which is it's basically allows the GPUs to talk directly to each other without using a CPU in the middle. And like we talked about, that CPU is a pinch point. So it can bypass the CPUs and talk straight across to each other. And those graphics processor units, the bandwidth across there is over 3.5 TB, which is extraordinary. I mean, again, thanks for geeking out with me on all this stuff, but I just want to show that NVIDIA is far more than just their graphics processing units, and it is really turning into a full AI systems company. And so let's just quickly look back at this iteration of the semiconductor, the Vera chip this year, compared to the Blackwell chip last year, and the year before that, the Hopper chip. Okay. The cost per token that we just talked about for the Hopper chip 2 years ago was about $10 per million tokens. Okay. Last year's Blackwell was about $1 per million tokens. This year's Vera Rubin chip is 10 cents per million tokens. So you can see that just at a 10x over each year, it's increased or decreased the cost by 100-fold over just 2 years, which is incredible because at the end of the day, this all comes down to the energy usage and the cost per token. And no one's doing that better than NVIDIA. They also talked about physical AI, their push into robotics, and also developing low Earth orbit data centers using the sun's power and sending compute back to us. So data centers in space coming to you soon. The last thing I want to point out from a stock perspective is that over this last year, 6 months specifically, or 8 months, you know, the hyperscalers like Google and Meta and Microsoft have really been, their stocks have been punished because of how much they've been spending on their capital expenditure to build out data centers and their AI infrastructure. But NVIDIA has been punished by it too, and yet they are one of the major or the largest recipient of that spend. So just something to keep in mind, you know, that I've been watching. Obviously, I think NVIDIA is an incredible company, but the stock has absolutely done nothing for about 7 months. And so I'm just pointing all of this out as a reminder. A few more things about NVIDIA and then we're done. They have such a large cash flow, and this is just a competitive advantage that I'm pointing out now. Their cash flow is so much times greater than anyone else that they're able to secure the manufacturing rights with Taiwan Semiconductor well into the future. So they're buying up those rights years into the future with all of that cash flow, which no one can keep up with that. So there's that, combined with the fact that Taiwan Semiconductor makes more per hour of manufacturing when they make the NVIDIA chips than anyone else's. So they make more money per hour. And so that the combination of those two things, I think, is pretty powerful. And then last but not least, I just want to say that on this note is that Nvidia's forward price to earnings multiple now is 21 times price to earnings. Their historic 5-year historic average is 45 times. So it is less than half of what it's historically been. And yet they're putting out a new architecture every year as a cadence, whereas the competitors are about every 2 years. So yes, Nvidia has a lead right now, and they are doubling the pace of everyone else. So they've got the lead, and they're pulling ahead, and so another competitive advantage. So the last thing I want to say is a positive note for the S&P 500. I know that I've been a little bit very cautious, in the last couple of months, and that's my job and hopefully your job too. But a positive note about the S&P 500 is that, as you know, over the last 6 months, it really has done nothing. It's been flat. And that can be very concerning, meaning that, has it topped out and all of that, as we've talked about. But over those 6 months, while it's been flat, the price to earnings multiple of the S&P 500 has come down from 23 times price to earnings down to 21 times, which is great. And I like to think about the analogy of the beach ball being held underwater, and that as the price to earnings multiple comes from 23 to 21, which is significant, again, that's approaching 10%, that lets some of that air out of that beach ball. So instead of so much pressure under the water, which of course can possibly mean that the ball comes popping up and all of that good stuff. We've, talked about that analogy, but with less air in that ball, there's less pressure into that water. So while the last 6 months really has seen no action, that shrinking multiple is a little bit of a pressure relief valve. So I like that. And the very last thing that I'm going to say is at 21 times price to earnings multiple for the average S&P 500 stock is equal to Nvidia's price to earnings multiple, forward price to earnings multiple of 21 times, which is quite the interesting comparison to me, to compare a company like Nvidia with their 75% gross margin, incredible, all of the metrics we've talked about compared to the average stock in the S&P 500. So obviously, I think Nvidia is an incredible company, and I know at some point it's going to get back on its horse, and the stock is going to jump up. So I just wanted to remind everyone of the of everything that they do and how they're really transforming from more than just a semiconductor company to a full AI systems provider. So there you go. Hope it helps. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Cheers.